All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Why don't we just start our panel discussion right here? Very happy to be with you folks. And let me briefly introduce our panelists right here to my far right, and Sophie right there. Sophie Goldschmidt, if I pronounce your last name correctly.
Good.
And Group Managing Director, CSM Sport and Entertainment. And to my immediate right here, Robert Ranklin, who goes with Rob, right?
Rob, yeah.
And the CEO of Consolidated Press Holdings. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And to my immediate left, my old friend adjacent to me, David Shoemaker, CEO, NBA China. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And also next to him, Mr. Chaudhry Sidyondong. I hope I correctly pronounce your name. The founder and chairman of One Championship based in Singapore. And to my far left, Mr. Jim Small, VP, Asia Pacific, MLB. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Well, folks, actually, we are very happy to be here. This is really quite a moment for Asia right now as far as a lot of things are going on. However, sports and entertainment are always some hot topics right here. So, for example, right now in Asia, specifically in China, China is already taking the leading role as far as the overseas market is concerned for NBA. If I'm not mistaken, David, actually it's the largest overseas market outside the United States. And also baseball is still booming, is still growing in Korea, in Japan, in Chinese Taipei, and so forth, even in mainland China as well. And even mixed martial arts is growing tremendously. The momentum is right there. So the nature of doing sports in Asia has really changed. And in what way, I would like to also open up this topic, open up the panel discussion with this topic is really what we would like to know more, specifically perhaps from traditionally we do B2B to B2C, and it really has changed a lot, the nature itself. David, why don't we just start with you? And because when we talked over a little bit, you were very adamant about this topic. Please voice your opinion about this momentum right now.
Sure, and I like to think of what the NBA does in China in two tranches. Really, one is everything you would expect the NBA to be doing globally. Selling sponsorship, licensing media, both TV and digital, selling merchandise, running events, grassroots events, and we actually run 2 NBA games a year. We'll have our 21st and 22nd game in China this coming October. And that's been the part of our business that we've really focused on over the last, frankly, almost 30 years that we've been operating in China. And I must say that's the part that's got a lot of attention and where the business has been growing really strong. The second part is that because we're in China and because of what we've been able to do and the opportunity that exists, we've been able to innovate our business in ways that we don't do anywhere else in the world for the NBA.
Right.
So for example, we have an elite basketball training academy in Guangdong province in Dongguan. We just opened our first of many, we call them NBA play zones, but interactive play areas for children aged 2 to 9. And e-commerce and our flagship e-commerce stores. And so it's that second tranche of the business where we're really starting on focusing on having a direct relationship with our consumers as opposed to one where we've typically just been trying to license our business to other businesses.
More B2C now.
A little bit the focus. I think that kind of the way we like to think of it is it's a lot easier in theory to get 10 renminbi a month from every person than to go and negotiate $1 million deals. Mm-hmm. And if you can get 10 renminbi a month from even a small percentage of the population, my gosh, that's a heck of a business.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rob, I understand you also have a lot to weigh in terms of this momentum right now. Please do.
Well, Don, this is, after 25 years in banking, this is my first sports and entertainment panel, so I'm pretty happy about that. So I'm enjoying that change immensely. First time I've done a panel without a tie, with facial hair, so there's lots of changes going on. But being an ex-banker, I can't help but start with the macro, to frame the macro. Old habits die hard. And if you look at Crown and CPH, we've got about $20 billion of infrastructure in the cities we operate in. And that infrastructure is the success of that infrastructure and the profits it derives inextricably linked to the sports and entertainment and offering in each of those cities. So if you take Melbourne, which is our signature head office property, you've got the Australian Open in January, you've got the Grand Prix in March, you've got the AFL football finals in September, and the biggest horse racing carnival in the world is held at the end of October and November. So, and if you look at last year, on a very, very bleak Winter's July in Melbourne used to be one of our worst weekends of the year. There was a certain UFC fight between Holly Holm and Ronda Rousey. It became our 5th biggest weekend in Melbourne that last year. There were 55,000 attendees, 22,000 people came from overseas. Extraordinary. And that product and offering didn't exist, and it transformed a sleepy Melbourne winter's night. But if you look at the super macro, you've got we're leveraged into the Asian consumer and the growth of the Asian consumer. If you go back to 1980, there were 14 Grand Prix, which is pretty topical in the world. None of them were held in Asia. You come forward to 2016, there are 21 Formula One Grand Prix, of which 6 are held in Asia. And knowing John Malone as I do, I'm sure there'll be more under his ownership, both in China and in the United States. And if you think about the 3 most watched sporting events in the world, I'm sure most of you will get the first 2. That's the opening ceremony of the Olympics. The most watched was, of course, Beijing. The second, and this is all due respect to my American cousins, and I love my US sports immensely, the second is, of course, the FIFA World Cup football final. Mm-hmm. And I'll bet my life on it, because I'm in the gaming business, not many of you will get the third. Any guesses out there? It actually, sorry? IPL. IPL? Close. It's actually India versus Pakistan. In cricket, watched by over 1 billion people, and that match was played in the wonderful city of Adelaide. So it's just, and actually Pakistan versus Indian cricket matches represent, I think, 3 of the top 10 most watched football games in history. So emergence of the Asian middle class, and then technology. I'll leave you with one thought in technology, and that is, it's not how traditional sports it's consumed. I'll leave you with a forward-leaning thought around esports and video games. Video games is a $100 billion business. Esports is a $1 billion business. We're just about to hopefully buy our first esports team, trained in Korea. All good esports teams are trained in Korea, to our Korean cousins. Got to be trained in Korea, cost about $5 million. And the most profitable esports tournament in the world last year, the prize money, $16 million. The prize money for the Australian Open, $30 million. This industry hasn't even started. And you can buy one of these teams, come and talk to me afterwards, for about $5 million. You've got to have Korean trained athletes. So I think this whole impact on how people spend their time, where the Asian middle class are going to go and visit, what they're going to watch, whether it be on television or mobile, and the cities they're going to visit, is all linked into this sport and entertainment. And we're cheering for the NBA in China, we're cheering for all the other sports. We're agnostic around the sports, but we're not agnostic around having the best content and the best sporting events in the cities in which we operate.
Well, really, obviously, we notice that sports and entertainment are always together in many ways, but more so than ever right now. Yeah. And if you talk about e-gaming, obviously, who would imagine 10 years ago this would be even considered part of the potential Olympic events? I mean, this is
Olympic events.
Right, exactly. I'm just
rugby,
saying,
and just
really,
made it. So.
By the same token, I'm just saying this event could really, down the line, be part of the Olympics.
No question.
But as you mentioned, the revolution or the innovation is going on. The revolution or innovation of, shall we say, digital consumption and digital knowledge, technology is developing so fast and is taking place so rapidly. Sophie, from your point of view, what do you think this kind of momentum, would that change the behavior of people, especially youngsters? We're talking about millennial generation down the line. Would that hurt or the beauty of matches or games, or would that actually help? Or should we actually rethink or reposition ourselves in terms of dealing with youngsters' consumption behaviors down the line? I mean, is this a positive sign, or is it something that we have? How do we actually tackle this?
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly positive sign. I mean, to reach the millennials and the next generation, you need to be doing it digitally. So the fact now that through esports or just e-gaming in general, now have that opportunity, I think it's great. And that can be a new entryway into getting more engaged in more traditional sports as well. I mean, we all want to reach new audiences. We're all trying to broaden what we're doing. So now there's just another avenue to do that. And to Rob's point, it's not going anywhere. I mean, the proliferation of esports and just how quickly it's growing, and it hasn't even started. I mean, okay, in South Korea it's been around for a while, but the rest of the world really has just
Needs to
woken
catch
up
up,
in the last sort of 3 to 5 years. But the numbers that are watching it online, even the live events, it's quite phenomenal. I mean, I was in Rio for the Olympics a couple of weeks ago, and even the Olympic Games, the IOC has opened up to it. They had a test event around e-gaming in Rio, and they plan to have an even more sort of organised, broader tournament in Tokyo in 2020. So yeah, I think it's incredibly exciting. And just looking at it more broadly, I mean, to now become properly global and engage in that way. I mean, David talked about what the NBA are doing, but now to have that direct engagement is so much easier through digitization, and that's only going to continue.
What about the two gentlemen to my far left there, Jim and Chaudhry? I mean, is it too disruptive right now to have, because right now, youngsters really, like my daughter, they tend to actually go, more to their mobile devices right now through that internet work. I mean, they get everything, right? I mean, would that be hurting the beauty of our games, for example, would that prevent them from going to any baseball games, and if you will?
Well, we I'll take it first.
We'll get to Chaudhry as well.
Started in 2000, 2001, Major League Baseball really was kind of ahead of the curve on the digital consumption of our product. And so we recognized very early that we needed to get our product in the hands of our customers wherever they were. And whether that was on a cell phone or on an iPad or on a television set, we needed to service what the demand was. And so what we've seen as that has grown is that it actually serves as a complement to the main revenue source for us, which is in the United States, which is bringing people into the ballpark. There's been an explosion really in the last 10 years of digital consumption of our product in the United States. Incidentally, we've had our highest attendance records, the highest 10 have all happened in the last 10 years. So we're driving 75 million people a year into our ballparks. The reason why we're doing that is because we look at digital as not just a distribution of content solution, we look at it as a complete solution. So if I am sitting in a bar in Manhattan and decide with my friends I want to go to a Yankee game that night, I can pull up on my phone and see if there are tickets left. I can see where that view from that seat is. I can buy the ticket. I can get to the ballpark. I can scan the ticket. I can check in on my phone, and I can see that my good friends, David and Chaudhry are there, so I can go see them at their seats. I can see where the lines to the bathrooms are the shortest. And go do what I need to do there. So I can do everything. So we use it as a way to get people into the ballpark. The reason we do that is because our business in the United States, and just like Chaudhry's here and David's in the United States, is in Canada, we are just like the hotel business or the airline business in that if we don't sell that seat for that game that day, we can't inventory and sell it the next day. If a plane leaves Changi tonight, with an empty seat, Singapore Airlines can't resell that. So we're the exact same way. We have to get people in and get them back 5, 6, 8 times a year. So we have a 3-hour period where we can affect them. We control everything except the score of the game and the weather. And then we have a couple of ballparks where we actually control the weather too. So we focus so much on our customer to make sure that experience is fun and entertaining and value for what they're spending. And that's really been the key to success. So I think digital really not just complements that, it's an integral part of that.
Chaudhry, yes, indeed. You and I, when we talked to each other about this issue, you said definitely we can take advantage of this momentum by capitalizing on the digital innovation or development. Please share some light on that, please.
So, when I started One Championship almost 5 years ago, I had a very simple big picture thesis. One was that there are several multi-billion-dollar sports media properties in every region of the world. You go to America, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, UFC, all worth $4 to $20 billion apiece.
Amazing.
You go to Europe, same thing. EPL, Formula One, Bundesliga, Spanish Liga, all worth $2 billion to $20 billion apiece. You come to Asia, there's literally nothing on a Pan-Asian basis. So I said to myself, Asia's a home of martial arts for 5,000 years. I believe I can reignite and introduce martial arts in a way that honors our tradition and our rich history in martial arts. Underneath that layer of that simple thesis was the fact that because of technology, because of social media, because of the entire breakdown of traditional media, the value of live sports, anybody who owns live sport content, that is the killer content. What do I mean by that? Because we can watch now on our mobile devices, on our laptops, on TV and all that stuff, traditional broadcasters, i.e. people who own radio stations, who own newspapers, who own magazines, who own TV stations, in the prior world, anyone who owned hard assets, the pipes, owned the entire customer. What's happening because of technology is that now it's the content owners that dictate everything. Everything else is a commodity and non-scalable. When was the last time you read a newspaper? When was the last time you bought a magazine? When was the last time you watched a TV show on the TV schedule? When was the last time you watched a soap opera movie? So all that's getting disintermediated. But sports, live sports, when I say to you it's World Cup final, it's 9 p.m., you got to go watch it at 9 p.m. The whole world wants to watch it as a shared experience. And what does that mean? It means advertisers, sponsors, media broadcasters, demand is huge for that. Given the fact that their core business now, they can't go to Procter & Gamble, Unilever anymore and say, hey, at 5 p.m. we have Friends show and we have 5 million viewers, et cetera, et cetera. That era is gone. So the third layer is that the fact that everything can go viral now. So if you are, I view this whole digitization as a huge plus for a young company like myself as we try to expand our footprint across Asia and the rest of the world. But those are the three kind of factors. So I think, I echo what Jim is saying. It's an accelerant and it's going to be huge for any sports property that can really adopt technology as its core competence.
Mm-hmm. Well, time really has moved on, really, and so many things are happening and so exciting right now. But I think the next question is for every panelist here. And also, by the way, when we actually are done, well, not done really, through with the part of our discussion, we leave some time for folks here. Right, the floor will be open, and you guys please feel free to raise your hands and also pose some questions to our panelists as well. So the question is really the inbound and also foreign IP right now has been very successful in Asia, right? Really the tendency itself has been helping many local leagues, many local teams and local clubs grow even stronger, and the popularity is there. I mean, from your point of view, David, NBA is a typical example, and CBA is doing so well. Chinese Basketball Association is getting more and more popular and noticeable. And many would say, arguably, it is really they owe a lot to the presence of NBA in China and also in the world, because the influence is right there, and in many ways it has raised the bar of many local teams and so forth. I'm sure you have a lot to share in this respect.
Well, absolutely, and I actually agree with what Chatri has to say about what digitization and other developments in the marketplace have done to the value for premium live sports content, in particular in China. We've seen it play out with a number of soccer leagues and some massive deals that are being done. But the one that got most attention was the Chinese Super League, soccer league, $8 billion over 8 billion renminbi, excuse me, over a 5-year period. For a league that, certainly when I came to China was, rife with corruption issues and the quality of play hasn't been great. And then this massive transfer fee market underpinning all of that to bring some players to China in their prime.
A little bit, but still leaves a lot to be desired.
Well, it's incredibly popular. I live in Beijing. You walk along the street near the Workers' Stadium, and the atmosphere around the Beijing Guan soccer team is incredible. And the same thing we see happening in the Chinese Basketball Association. They're probably just a step or so behind because they're in the next round of negotiations. I'm certain that there will be a huge play for the Chinese Basketball Association rights when they come up for bid at the end of next season. And then we'll see the infrastructure that comes behind it. That basketball league has made enormous strides in the 20 years that it's been in existence. We don't compete with them, though. No. I mean, at least I don't think so. We think that anything that happens to grow the game of basketball in our market is great. And
although the local league there, obviously, it takes you as an example, and by copycatting a lot of your, so to speak, positive signs and positive elements.
we're flattered. I mean, and you know, our games are on in China in the morning, so they're played in prime time in the U.S. and in Canada. And what used to be a real challenge for us, I used to get asked the question, like, what's the biggest challenge for the NBA and your business in China? It used to be a time zone answer. Now the time zone is the opportunity because of mobile. Our partner, Tencent, we show 600 live games for free across mobile devices in a really slick offering. And so now we get people when they're commuting to work, at work. It's a productivity hit, but it's been a wonderful development for us in our business.
Well, Sophie, I mean, I understand when we talked about this issue, you used the word longevity, if you remember, in order to actually make these local teams, local clubs, and et cetera, not only thrive, but also not only survive, but also thrive down the line, use the word longevity. How do we actually take this momentum really to, you know, because of the strong momentum of the inbound, shall we say, the inbound technology and the inbound actually successful IPs, right? How do we actually try to make it really happen that those local teams and local clubs could be even stronger, could really be more sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, I think as the fan bases grow for these global leagues around the world and they become fans of these different sports, being able to touch and feel it on a local level becomes even more important. So as long as the competition can head in the right direction and they do become more competitive and you get enough of the global stars playing in these local leagues, then I think it can happen, because to have successful local teams and leagues, you need to have people coming week in, week out. You need to drive those fan bases. You need to have, you know, ticket sales increasing, merchandise, etc.
Right.
And that makes those local clubs sustainable. But they can get inspired initially by watching the best of the best. And then if you can sprinkle that amongst the leagues around the world, China specifically, I mean, we're seeing it with the Chinese Super League. I mean, interesting to see that now, you know, Sky from the UK paid a decent amount of money to broadcast the Chinese Super League back in the UK, which you wouldn't have thought that was possible a few years ago. But that investment now allows them to build it in an even more sustainable way locally. I think it is really important, some of the rules around it, so that you make sure that enough local talent is getting the opportunity to play, and those quota systems, I think, for the sustainability locally of the leagues is really important. But yeah, I think, you know, things can change very quickly, so it's an incredibly exciting time on that front. And I think ultimately, if you do get local stars, that can have the biggest impact. I mean, the global stars are fantastic as well, but when you have a local star really transcend and become a global icon, then that's where you see a massive shift. I mean, again, we've seen it back home recently, having been in Rio, but the impact of Team GB, who did phenomenally well, surprised a lot of people, even compared to the Usain Bolts, etc., who have a tremendous impact. But when a local hero does well and reaches the top on a global stage, that's hugely powerful.
Absolutely.
So I think you've got to develop it in a way that you can build the local talent in a sustainable way as well.
Actually, in the just concluded Rio Olympics, we witnessed also Australians, many national players' success. And I mean, Rob, you must have a lot to share as well in terms of their success stories. You know, they're representing different, Australian national teams in the Olympics, and they also did very well. And because of this, shall we say, inbound and influence right there.
Yeah, my therapist says not to talk about it anymore. The Brits did a bit better than us.
It's very rare.
The Team GB did incredible, and for Team GB to do so well after a home Olympics in London, it's unprecedented. And it was a great lift for the country living in the UK, particularly post-Brexit. So here's big cheers to Team GB. I think that I just want to make one comment, or just two comments, Dom. One, I think that we think really, really hard about what millennials are going to do with their time, given how good the digital experience is. And I think it's a challenge for all of us on these panels. How are millennials going to spend their time? What are they going to go and actually watch in a live sense? We're seeing less of them at our movie theatres. They don't go to the movies quite as much. It needs to be a real blockbuster or a niche documentary. We're just releasing this climate change documentary on Friday night with Leonardo DiCaprio. Hopefully they'll come and watch that, but we certainly can't get them to go to the movies anymore for a vanilla movie. And the digital experience is so strong. So in our shareholding in Fox Sports, the live offering has got to be so good in our view, whether it be at Crown Resorts or in the stadium. And we had, I think there were like 54 cameras to cover the Super Bowl in New York. the NRL Grand Final in Sydney in a month's time, we're going to have 29 cameras. I mean, that's expensive. So the cost of production, where the millennials go, and trying to solve for that, and how they're going to spend their time, and they're certainly not going to spend as much time. So when I come back in my next life, I'm going to reinvent golf. It's going to be 10 holes, not 18.
Okay.
It's going to take 2.5 hours, and the cup's going to be a bit bigger. So they're dying in their graves up in Scotland, but I mean, how people spend their time, how much time they're prepared to spend, and the choices they make, and the experience you've got to offer them is something that we think really, really hard about.
I think it should be 12 holes.
12. Okay.
That would be the perfect.
More than
18's too much. I mean,
But just to follow on the point of Sophie mentioned about local heroes and local athletes,
Yes.
especially,
Well said.
and I do feel that when we had Yao Ming in the NBA,
Yes.
I mean, you know, the viewership rate itself, and I mean, skyrocketed, because you always feel that when you have a local hero, you have someone that you can identify with. I'm sure in this respect, Chaudhry has a lot to share with us as well, because you, through the articles or through the speeches that I noticed, you always try to advocate the fact that actually to grow some local athletes and then place them to international platform is really vital and important to grow this sport. Please.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, that's our entire strategy for One Championship is local relevance with global appeal. So, and we want to have an interplay on Asia's rich history of you can call it disagreements between countries or whatever you want, but it's really about the passion, igniting something that you're very proud of. If you look at someone like Manny Pacquiao, I would say he's probably the biggest athlete coming out of Asia. He was just a street kid in Manila, and then he got into the global stage and won 10 world titles in boxing. And he's literally, now he's a senator and he's going to go for presidency. He's literally, when he competes, the entire nations of Philippines stops to watch the game, and crime rate literally drops 80-90%. Those are true stats, by the way. And so the thought process is, for us, is in Asia, historically, we've never had Asian superstars, no heroes. So we would import our heroes and call David Beckham our hero, or we would call Michael Jordan our hero, or we would say, yay, go Chicago Bulls. But realistically, you're in, Bangkok, Thailand, or Ho Chi Minh City. What do you really relate with to Michael Jordan, other than the fact that he is the world's greatest basketball player in history? The reality is, when you look at numbers, local athletes, local heroes who then elevate themselves onto the global stage, that is the key recipe for sports media properties to ignite across Asia and across the countries. And so for me, it's all about superheroes. We always say internally at One Championship, we want to unleash superheroes across Asia.
yes.
So in this case, Jim, when are we going to have the next Yao Ming baseball player from the Chinese side? I know you're striving very hard. You're based in Tokyo. However, on the other hand, the market from the neighboring country is so sizable. You won't ignore that, would you?
Yeah, we've been looking what David has been doing and his predecessors for many years, and we're mimicking that in a lot of ways. We started investing in China about 8 or 9 years ago, with the idea that we do need local heroes. Exactly what Chaudhry said. We've seen that with our own business in Japan. The reason that I've been in Asia for almost 15 years now is because of Ichiro Suzuki. Because when he came to the United States and started playing for the Mariners, it created so much more business opportunity for us that's why I came here. So we're constantly looking for that. To go back down to your first question, though, about the indigenous or the local sports and the local sports leagues, one thing, and I'm interested in hear what everyone else has to think about this. One thing that I've seen after having been here for a while, and particularly in North Asia with baseball, is that people were involved in sports, owners were involved in sports for reasons other than building the business directly from that team. We learned a long time ago with the NBA Finals in 1978, I think, were on tape late after the evening news. And David Stern came in and understood that he needed to change the way that the NBA did business. We were very much the same way. In the early 1990s, we had a number of work stoppages. We had to change the way we were viewing our sport too. Mm-hmm. In Japan, baseball teams are named after local corporations. So not only is there not an incentive for that team to make money, there's actually a disincentive. If a team is named after a yogurt company and the team loses money, the parent company can write off that loss as an advertising expense. So if they make a little bit of money, they can't write that off. Now think about that. Who loses in that scenario? The fan, the customer, because they don't really care. They don't really care about getting your business. Now that's starting to change. It's gotten better in Japan. It's gotten better in Korea and in Chinese Taipei. But I've seen that really elsewhere in other sports in Asia. I think it was the change was led. I think in Australia. I think Australia has understood the value of that. I think what Australia has done with the Big Bash has been brilliant, and what IPL has done in India. I think that's brilliant. But I think we're starting to see that kind of shift, throughout other sports throughout Asia. And I do think that, and I'm sorry to be talking so much, but Chatri and I were on a panel yesterday, and the moderator said, we want you guys to get, disagree on something so you guys can, it can be an exciting conversation. So I hate to constantly be agreeing with what he's saying, what everyone else is saying.
But you can also echo the rest, don't worry.
Well, if I'm going to disagree with anybody, it's not the guy from mixed martial arts. So. But what he's done is clearly identified that there is a marketing opportunity and he's very smart in using the culture that exists for martial arts throughout every one of these countries. But he's very laser focused in what he's trying to do here from a business perspective. And I think Asian sports needs to do that kind of across everything. And if they do that, something David said a couple days ago is right on. If basketball is popular in China, if the CBA does well, he'll take that because that's more basketball fans for him to market to. And we feel the same way. If baseball is popular in Japan, people can buy a New York Yankee cap and a San Francisco and a Yomiuri Giants cap. Don't necessarily want to buy in a Houston Rockets cap, though. I'm sorry.
All right. Well,
but that's soft power. That's soft power projection. If you go back to being an exchange student in the US in the '80s, and Dallas was America's team, and it was just an extraordinary time around that franchise. I think you can see what Chatri's onto. I think is really powerful. I mean, I think in a way that Cirque du Soleil was a great soft power projection, for parts of Europe. I think martial arts and what you're doing, I think is really cool.
Thank you.
And we're thinking about a couple of movies around that space, but I think soft power and cultural projection done through sports or through that is extraordinarily powerful, done well.
And Don, one other thing, everybody, we are all lucky to work in an industry that has this strange and unusual relationship with its customer.
Yes.
In that it is our customers paint their faces, the color of our teams, right? I'm a big Marriott Rewards guy, but I don't paint any part of my body with the Marriott Rewards logo. So we have this unnatural relationship with our customer, and that passion that exists for all of our sports is something that we recognize, and that's exactly why we build our sponsorship business off that passion. If somebody's a baseball fan, we can sell that affinity that we have, that irrational passion for our sport, to a bank or to a hotel chain or to an airline, so that will rub off on them. So that's built in. That passion for sport is built in, and we're just fortunate enough to work in an industry where that exists.
Absolutely. Well, I'm from China. Actually, my background is that I grew up there and educated there, and we tend to, mainland Chinese crowd, we tend to close the door to say that our hardware knowledge is right there, or thanks to modern technology or development, our high tech is right there. Yet on the other hand, in terms of catching up with the rest of the world, in terms of really taking our sports professionalism to the next level, our software knowledge, our software content is not there. But I would like to, pick your brain really. How do we really help China? I mean, because if you talk about Asia, the market of Asia, China cannot be ignored in any sense for obvious reasons. How do we actually help China really professionalize even further down the line to make it really more, so to speak, connected with the rest of the world in the sports industry, in the industry of the biz of sports and entertainment? Sophie, because when I touched upon that issue with you, you had a lot to to offer. Please do share.
Yeah, I think it's about partnerships and also just the two-way flow of information, investment, business, whatever you call it. I mean, it's amazing to see now what is coming out of China. around the world from a sports perspective, the investments they're making in whether it's Premiership football teams, other teams around the world. I think when you get that two-way flow, then things can speed up and change and transform even more quickly. But I think we spoke a little bit. My company's entered into a strategic partnership with Alisports, which, for us is quite groundbreaking. I mean, to have that local intelligence expertise, world-class expertise as far as what Alibaba and Alisports are trying to do, but giving some of our experience and sharing our knowledge from what we've learned around the world seems to be a really good fit. It's early days for us, but I think it's going really well. And I think rather than recreating the wheel, finding partners that can add value, that can do things that you can't do, I think is really important. And culturally, I mean, I think that's got to be the way ahead as well. We're realistic within Asia, every market's very different, certainly very different compared to other regions in the rest of the world. So we've invested heavily in having people on the ground as well. But I think at the end of the day, it's being open-minded to true partnership. And finding the right people that you can work with. But I think China's already very far ahead, and that will hopefully translate into more investment back into Asia more broadly as well.
Right. But this process of professionalization is a long process. I'm sure you would like to also weigh in.
I think President Xi's already declared that China's going to be a football power, so I think they're going to be just fine. I mean, I'm sure they'll get it right. What I would say is the emergence of countries in sports is pretty closely correlated to the emergence of their brands in a business sense. And if you think back in history and look at the emergence of Samsung and its alignment around the Olympics, I remember seeing Samsung back in the Sydney Olympics, and you correlate its association with the Olympics with the branding of Samsung was extraordinarily powerful. And then you go to another great example, I think, is Emirates as an airline. We're sitting in Singapore, so Singapore Airlines unquestionably number one, but Emirates, wow, what a job they've done. And it now just rolls off the tongue so easily that it's Emirates Stadium at Arsenal. It's Collingwood, which is the number one AFL team, has had Emirates on their shirt for years. Emirates sponsored the cricket teams. I mean, it's extraordinary how they've transformed that brand through association with sport. And the one to watch is Huawei. If you look at what Huawei is doing with German football, I mean, Huawei is now the third biggest handset manufacturer in the world. It's an incredible company. But if you now see Huawei with German football, they're branded on, I think, 3 of the stadiums. They're doing a massive job in football. They've got Leica cameras co-badged, which is not a sports thing. But I think this whole association with brands and sport, and it's a Chinese brand, and I think watch this space around Huawei and sport. I think we'll all be sitting here in 10 or 15 years' time, it'll be like Samsung, And that's before Apple buys the Premier League rights. So it's going to be...
Just a comment on President Xi's pronouncement, because I think that's probably the single thing that's had the most profound impact in the sporting world in China in the last decade, probably. There's a real risk, though, associated with it, which is that they'll get it wrong in terms of how they decide to make China a football powerhouse. I've been inside the inner circle of the Chinese Basketball Association, where they're trying to figure out how do we make our national team better, and
how to qualify for the World Cup.
And they can't figure it out, and they scratch their heads, and they look at Lithuania, and they say to themselves, how does Lithuania have a better basketball team than we do? And they do, year in and year out. And the traditional Soviet model still exists in China, where they sort of separate kids at young ages and say, you look like you're going to be a talented basketball player because we measure you now, and we measure for how you're going to be, and we think you're going to be 6'10" or greater, and so you're going to be a basketball player. Weeding out all of the potential Allen Iversons that could ever come out of China and be not just great basketball players, but inspiration to other Chinese kids who say to themselves, wow, I don't have to be superhuman in size like Yao Ming to play in the NBA. So one of the things we've really tried to focus on is sort of stepping around the Chinese Basketball Association, if you will, is we did a partnership with the central government and the Ministry of Education, and we said we'll invest millions in teaching basketball to kids in PE classes.
At a grassroots level.
Exactly, bouncing balls, shooting hoops, and for the fun of the game. Not because we think that we're going to create 25 Yao Mings all of a sudden, but because we think that's the way to grow the sport And that's the way to create the infrastructure necessary to have a championship national team. And so I worry a little bit with all the magnates, Wang Jianlin and boss, Mr. Ma, that there's this, he said we must invest, I will invest, and I will buy a team, and I will get the best players and bring them to China. I worry a little bit about
Well, I'm glad Alibaba is not blindly doing in that fashion. However, as you said, from the grassroots level, that is very important and to start really in the positive way. But Jim, when I talked to you, you mentioned that you are a couple of years, your organization, so to speak, a couple of years behind the NBA in China. I mean, isn't that what you're doing right now, just to start from this grassroots level, to educate, to popularize this, the rules, the regulation of your sport, in order to really make people feel they have this kind of easy access to beauty of baseball?
So we look at it, our investment is on a railroad track, and on one side of that track is high-end development of baseball. So it's to get the idea of developing our Yao Ming from China someday. And so that is working with the national team. The Chinese national team is actually ranked 12th in the world in baseball. So
better than basketball.
Exactly. And they've beaten Taiwan in the World Baseball Classic and the Olympics. And then the other side is to make the game more popular and create context for the game, because again, it doesn't matter where you live, there needs to be context if you're going to invest in a sport. Particularly important for us because our game is inherently difficult to understand. You can't just watch a game on television and immediately understand baseball. We've seen there's a parallel between playing the game and being a customer of the game. So we do things like, our games so far this year, we're on Alisports, and we have over 20 million people that have watched, or unique viewers who have watched games so far this year. We have road shows, we have a strong consumer products company, so that we're in schools, investing in schools. So the idea is to have points of contact with a kid or their parents, so that when hopefully we get that Yao Ming, we can take advantage of it. We'll be prepared to kind of do what David and his group has done. And we've had some success on it. One of the interesting things that we've had to do with developing talent is, David's right, the Soviet model existed in baseball too. For years and years and years, kids would play baseball in these 14 baseball schools around the country. And generally you would go there if you had no other path, if you weren't a good enough athlete to play another sport, and if you weren't a good enough student to go to school. So that wasn't working. What we had to do, if we were going to get better talent in, we had to go to parents and say, look, your kid's going to go to school from 8 to 4 every day. And then after school and on weekends, they're going to play baseball. That's enough. We know that's enough to create talent. We wanted it to be enough to get that parent to give us their child at 12 years old, and we're going to give them back to them at 18. We have 3 of those development centers, Nanjing, Changzhou, and Wuxi. We've had 35 kids graduate. All 35 are either playing professionally in China, collegiately in China or the United States, and we have one who's signed to a minor league contract with the Baltimore Orioles. So we've seen that proposition can work. We can get better talent in if we promise them the education that's necessary for that.
Well, actually, one of my friends' kids, as I mentioned, is in love with this program that you have created. Really.
Could you give me his email address?
I will.
Make sure that we...
the upcoming 6 years in Asia will be totally exciting. Not to mention that we're going to have the 2019 World Rugby, actually, the World Cup Rugby in Japan. And afterwards, we'll have the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, and of course, last but not least, the 2022 Beijing Zhangjiakou Winter Games. So in this respect, where do you see this, the direction? In other words, the Asia's multi-million-dollar professional sports and entertainment market or biz go? Where does it go?
I mean, I think we're at the very first inning of the sports revolution in Asia. I genuinely believe it. If you look at the sporting property and sporting culture and society in other regions of the world, fully developed, very entrenched in society, and Asia has been hugely lacking because of underinvestment. Just all across Asia, we kind of went through the industrial age in the last few decades, and now I believe we're into a phase of transition of the IP age, and obviously sports and entertainment, and obviously with the rising middle class, and in several years, Asia will have the largest middle class in the world. And another interesting fact is, Asia has 56% of the world's population, but only 9% of the world's global brands. So I think there's tremendous opportunity for entrepreneurs, for people in sports to elevate, because by definition, we're sports media properties. So we actually, One Championship is now in 118 countries, 1 billion homes around the world. We have significant ability to close that gap. So I really feel that we're right at the beginning, really of the entire revolution of sports. And I think every sport is going to benefit. And again, we have the whole underneath factor of, the underlying factor of traditional media getting attacked by technology, and therefore the demand for world-class production values of live sports is just going to skyrocket. I mean, another example is NFL with media rights, went from 1 billion in media rights to 7 billion media rights just in the last several years alone. That show you the power of what live sport and sport properties can do in each region.
Mm-hmm. In a way, really, Asia has this, only sky's the limit. Sophie, I'm sure you would like to chip in as well, because you talked about the huge potential actually right here in Asia in terms of the upcoming 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's unprecedented, I think. And when you are developing, I think growth can happen much more quickly. So to have that many successive events, I believe the World Basketball Championships as well in 2019 as well, and then looking beyond already rumours of a FIFA World Cup in China beyond that. So I think this is a really unique opportunity. We're incredibly excited about it. I think the infrastructure development it'll lead to, I think that's another area where there needs to be some investment, but there's nothing like a global event to really get that governmental support and develop the infrastructure for the facilities. And I think off the back of it, the legacy, which we've talked about, local heroes. Again, if they can perform, they'll never have a better environment with all that home support. So again, to create that next generation of local stars can be fantastic. And then it's just making sure that you can capture on that momentum and that enthusiasm, both commercially and from a grassroots development standpoint, so that it is sustainable. Mm-hmm. But to have so many back to back, I think it's a fantastic time to be involved in sport and entertainment in the region. It'll transform things here.
You've been nodding, Robin?
Rob? We're all in, Dong. I think it's the best bet in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Going to 3.5 billion middle-class consumers in Asia, I think it's an extraordinary opportunity. I wouldn't temper the enthusiasm, but I think the challenges of building local brands when there's been in a global world hasn't happened before. So we're a big cheerleader of local talent, local heroes, local brands.
Right.
But when your son's more interested in Chelsea because he plays FIFA than he is in the Sydney FC, that's a challenge, I think, for all of us and the communities we live in. And my final thought, which is way over the horizon, is participation. How correlated is participation in an activity to its ultimate success? And I think that all of us as parents and as participants in our society, we've got to really work hard. And I think each of us here has got a responsibility to get participation rates up. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think that's going to be a big issue in Asia for many years to come as the middle class explodes. But I think in developed markets, some of the sports we've talked about and we love, and that the participation's down. And at what point does an ebbing participation correlate with investment and activity, etc.? I think it's something that we think about a lot, and encourage all of you to think about a lot. Yeah.
David, actually, NBA China has always been sitting on the cutting edge. Each year around this time, you have the World Tour. Part of it is Beijing, Shanghai, and so forth. Mm-hmm. You blend the two key parts, right there, entertainment and sport together. Been very successful in this respect. And how do you want? Where do you go to take this to another level, so to speak, in this huge Asian market?
And it's an interesting question for us because we've had the local hero. Yeah. Yao Ming and some of his predecessors. But
also perhaps hopefully some successes down the line as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. The future's bright. Yi Jianlian re-signed with the Los Angeles Lakers. Right. Zhou Qi got drafted by the Houston Rockets, and Wang got drafted this year by the Memphis Grizzlies. I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket, though. But we've had our local hero. We're comparatively a mature business in China with multi-billion-dollar valuation. And so for us, it's a little bit sort of thinking about how do we take the fans that we have. We had 765 million unique people in China watched an NBA game last year. Wow. Like more, if you lined up the whole population, incredible. More than 1 out of every 2.
Yeah.
The challenge for us is how do you get those 765 million people to spend money with you? And that for us is, I wouldn't say we're just scratching the surface, but that's the opportunity for the NBA looking ahead.
Well, in terms of the future direction, I'm sure, Jim, you might have something to add on as well?
Yeah, in China or just in general in Asia?
In general, about Asia.
You know, I think one thing that Rob said is about participation. That's essential, and it's two ways. One, I see, because participation in baseball in places like Japan has dropped, and even Korea, and so that's one of the things that keeps me up at night and worried about, because it is something that, you know, when someone stops playing baseball, I see us as that we've lost an opportunity to have a customer. So that is something that concerns us, and we've addressed that through youth programs. We run a Little League championship now in Japan with 400 teams that get a chance to play. But one of the things that I've seen, I'm fortunate enough to work on a consultancy basis or a group with the Japanese government in terms of just general participation. And one of the things that we're seeing is that more people, you know, it's not just sports, but it's leisure activities, it's running, it's swimming, and actually in Japan, a lot of that is moving forward and moving up. So healthy lifestyle seems to be becoming more important in Asia. There's a lot of issues attached to that. There's social, economic issues that are attached to that, but I think that's an encouraging sign that if people are spending more time on, even if it's not specifically playing baseball, that they are remaining healthy and focusing more on leisure time is a positive sign on that.
I would just echo what Jim is saying in terms of participation, and I think the reason why One Championship has really exploded across Asia is because we had fertile ground of, you know, Asia being the home of martial arts for 5,000 years. There's a martial art in every single country.
Absolutely.
It's practiced in high school, in elementary school, in university. You know, judo, karate, aikido in Japan, taekwondo in Korea, Muay Thai in Thailand, kung fu in China, sambo in Russia. It's ingrained in the fabric of society. So for us, I think I was surprised by the uptake, just because you know, it's so entrenched, that participation, that it was an easy switch for people to understand, wow, that's cool, and then I already do that, I might as well learn this and that, and all of a sudden, so that's for us, definitely rings true. Like if you don't have participation, then it's very hard for a sport to grow.
And I know a lot of middle-aged people who are now picking up martial arts on the back of that, just to stay fit. That's pretty amazing.
I also think that, to what Sophie said earlier, esports gives us an opportunity as well there too, because if kids are not physically playing baseball, in our case, if we can move them into a baseball esport competition, then there's still an affinity to the game, and hopefully we can still capture them as a customer.
Very interesting. Actually, Double H, health, namely health and happiness, is also the philosophy of Alibaba itself, not just Alisports. And that Jack Ma has been really emphasizing this, so to speak, slogan very often. We still have a little bit of time left, actually. As I promised, the floor is going to be open. And this gentleman, yeah, we're going to do that. Please.
It's a great conversation. Thank you to everyone. Got a question for Jim and Dave, really. You obviously think about your respective businesses at an enterprise level, but fundamentally it's made up of a collection of franchises. So I'm interested in how franchise management is different. I mean, it's evident that as a fan, top quartile performance for 17 years on the trots, all well and good, but if you don't actually win the silver at some point, it's a very frustrating experience. So, and to add to that, and the EPL would come to mind, but I'm sure it's true of most sports, you've got a lot of owners who aren't necessarily driven by commercial outcomes. So how does that fit into your overall ethos, and how does it roll up into how you think about the sport?
You know, the 30 NBA team owners are also the principal shareholders of NBA China. 11% is owned by Disney, Legend Holdings, Li Ka-shing Foundation, and two banks, Bank of China and China Merchants. But we have two NBA team owners sit on the NBA China board of directors. And as a result, there's very much the fabric of the NBA plays through to the actual business that we run in China, requiring us, in effect, to operate our business and protect the brand in the way that the NBA does all around the world, everywhere else, but at the same time giving us then the licenses I spoke of earlier to innovate. The NBA commercially is organized a lot differently, let's say, than the EPL, where you see teams like Man United, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal, etc., coming to Asia, staging their own games, taking advantage of their own commercial opportunities rather than the league itself. In the NBA, outside of the local market of the 30 teams, those rights are pooled and represented by the league itself. And so while we will bring teams to China, and while we will create their microsites online and their Weibo sites and do all kinds of social media activities and bring their dance teams, it's all a league initiative in terms of how the teams are represented, how they're marketed, and how they're sold in our market. And that's, I really think, fundamentally different than what you see in football. Probably more similar to what you see in baseball, but it ultimately is what drives our business.
Yeah, exactly, David. Except for we don't have an entity that they have a shareholder agreement with. We are Major League Baseball International set up with the 30 teams as our shareholders in general for everything that we do. So everything is split 30 ways, and that's in some ways. I'm sure you may feel the same way, David. In some ways, that's tremendous for us because everyone has some skin in the game. It does create some challenges sometimes because you have teams saying, well, X team, I'm the most popular team in Japan. Why am I not making more money than Y team? And that can get a little hairy sometimes. But one of the great things for us, and really particularly with China, is we're spending someone else's money in China. I'm spending 30 people's money that's not mine, and it's my bosses and those 30 team owners. And they have bought in collectively to say, you know what, it's going to take some time. It's going to take a while. We've looked at what these guys did. As I told David before we came up, you guys were an overnight sensation that took 20 years because they were investing for 20 years or so, and then Yao Ming came, and everyone was like, wow, isn't the NBA lucky to get Yao? Well, no, they had spent a lot of time doing their business to be prepared for that. So our owners have gotten the same kind of way of thinking. So, but they also have told me, well, with the internet, you should be able to do it quicker than 20 years. But.
Just to follow that point, I mean, the thought is Stephen Curry's jersey is the #1 selling jersey around the world, and certainly in China. 1/30 of that goes to the Golden State Warriors, where you'd think, wow, that's a Golden State Warriors jersey. They would get the lion's share of that. But that's just how the NBA is structured. And I actually think it allows us to work in our market in a very focused, coordinated way, as opposed to 30 disparate efforts that are going on at the same time.
Yep.
Well, we literally have maybe 2 minutes left remaining. Okay, please. One more question.
Just one quick question for Sophie. With her rugby, your alma mater, rugby union, it seems to me it's a totally undeveloped sport on a global basis, and what you see the prospects for it, if you can talk freely about that. And then really piggybacking on this previous question, foreign ownership of teams within Asia, it seems to me that it's been it's progressing on almost a national champion basis right now. And is there really a possibility to sort of see more cross-fertilization as both the leagues and also the entrepreneurs develop sport on a more sub-regional basis?
Sophie, and I'm going to ask also Rob to answer the second question, maybe. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was working for the RFU, the English Rugby Football Union, before I came here. We recently hosted the World Cup, which was a huge success. It was fantastic. And to go back to your question, on a global scale, well, the Rugby World Cup, third largest sporting event around the world, is a huge opportunity and continues to grow. Actually, the future of the sport, in my opinion, is around sevens.
Yes.
We saw the impact that it had during the Olympics. I actually got there after the sevens competition had finished, unfortunately, but the buzz around it and the impact it created was fantastic, and I think kind of exceeded everyone's expectations. It was something that World Rugby had been trying to position, trying to get into the Olympics for quite a long time. But just the simplicity of the game, the fact that infrastructurally it's much easier to play. So countries that would probably struggle to ever become really competitive in 15s now have a real chance to become world-class in sevens. And we now have a professional World Series competition, which is a global year-round competition with players playing for their national teams, which I think is also quite an interesting and nice differentiator. It's not just playing for a club, you're actually representing your national team as a professional on a year-round basis. And it's going very, very well. And I think also we talked a lot about sort of the convergence of entertainment and sport, and Sevens has very much been positioned that way. So the audience it's appealing to, the way that it's presented, whether you're a rugby fan or not, you're going to have a good day out at Sevens. I mean, in Asia, you're very familiar with the Hong Kong Sevens, which sets a very high standard. But that's also sort of set the image and atmosphere that we want to create around the world. So yeah, I think a lot more to come on the Sevens topic. It's going to go from strength to strength, which is great for rugby.
We're really out of time, but Rob, yes.
Massive supporter of Sevens, and I think in local communities you need local ownership as well. It's got to be a partnership type model to be successful. I think I think the best example of that was around the IPL. I mean, as cricket went truly global, you really needed to go with the local Indian entrepreneurs, and the teams that were most vibrant were ones where they had the subtle ethnic differences throughout the subcontinent. So I think you've got to have local ownership in the mix somewhere.
All right, folks, due to time constraint, we have to leave it here. Sophie, Rob, David, Chaudhry, and Jim, thank you so much for your presence and also your perspectives. Really appreciate it. And thank you very much indeed for having this moment with us. Really appreciate it. And then that wraps up this panel discussion. I'm Wang Dong. Thank you once again very much indeed.